The Texas sun doesn't just shine, it scorches. It burns down like the judgment of an old god, drying out the grass until it crackles, twisting the air itself into a shimmer. That kind of heat doesn't just make you sweat, it makes you remember. And sometimes it makes you ride back to places you swore you'd never see again. Cole Brandon rode alone, dust in his coat, silence in his chest. No posse, no words. Just him. A rifle across his back, a revolver at his side, and ghosts trailing behind. He was the kind of man who didn't talk much, not because he couldn't, but because he'd long since run out of things worth saying. Men like him, they don't go looking for trouble, but when it finds them, they don't turn away either. Word had come quiet, like a rumor that didn't want to be heard. A woman, taken, dragged north by bounty hunters with blood in their mouths and silver in their eyes. But not just any woman. Mescalero Apache, wild heart, sharp eyes, the kind of person who once stood between Cole and death with nothing but her will. Years ago, she'd saved his life. Now she was the one who needed saving. He didn't plan this return. Hell, he didn't even know if she was alive. But the moment he heard her name, something old stirred in him. Not love, maybe not even guilt, just something deeper, something like a debt, or a vow that had never stopped echoing. The place he rode into was no town anymore. It was a graveyard. The wind carried smoke, gunpowder, and something worse. The kind of stench that tells you violence wasn't just here. It had stayed a while. Burned wagons, blood in the dirt. No sounds except the buzzing of flies and the faint cry of a crow that didn't stick around. Bodies. Everywhere. Men, women. A child's hand reaching from under a blanket. And the worst part? No bullets. Just blades. Throats cut clean. That wasn't war. That was personal. That was efficiency. Bounty hunters didn't waste lead when steel would do. Under a broken wagon, Cole found the only thing still breathing. An old man, bleeding, broken, but alive just enough to whisper one truth. They took her. 5 riders. North, Snake Ridge. That was all Cole needed. He stood up, jaw clenched, eyes hard. He didn't speak. He just turned his horse to the north and rode straight into the wind. Because sometimes, the past doesn't come knocking. It just grabs someone you care about him and dares you to come find it. And Cole Brandon, he answered. Some trails don't just stretch across the land, they cut straight through a man's soul. Cole Brandon rode through the night, his eyes fixed on the horizon, but his mind locked on the past. The desert wasn't hiding the trail. 5 riders. Fresh tracks. Hoof prints pounded deep into the dirt like a challenge. These men weren't afraid of being followed. They didn't think anyone had the guts to try, but they hadn't counted on Cole. Every broken branch, every scuffed rock. They screamed of the girl they dragged behind them. And then, near a dry creek bed, he found it. A frayed rope, torn and ragged. And nearby, a piece of dark cloth stained with blood and snagged on a thorn bush. Not much blood, but enough. Enough to say she didn't go quietly. Enough to say she fought. Now here's something you don't hear in most Westerns. Sometimes, it ain't the fight that breaks a man. It's the memory of someone who once believed in him. And Ka? She didn't. Just believe in Cole, she saved him. Years back, he was nothing but a runaway with a bounty on his head and no name worth remembering. It was Ka's people who took him in, gave him food, shelter, a chance. But it was Ka who looked him in the eyes and told him he could be more than the ghost he thought he was. That's what brought him back into this fight. Not heroism, not justice. Debt. The kind of debt that no coin can pay, only blood. He remembered her then, not as a captive, but as a storm in a girl's frame. Brave. Reckless. The kind of person who would stand alone against 5 armed men if it meant protecting someone she loved. That's who they took. And that's why Cole's resolve hardened like iron under the Texas sun. He whispered it to no one, but it rang loud in the wind. I'll find her, or I'll bury every last one of them. You ever feel that kind of certainty? That bone-deep kind? It doesn't come often, but when it does, you don't turn back. You load your rifle, you tighten the reins, and you ride straight into the fire. Not because you're fearless, but because you made a promise. And Cole Brandon, he wasn't just chasing captors, he was chasing redemption, one hoofbeat at a time. You ever ride into a canyon and feel the air shift, like even the rocks are holding their breath? That's the kind of place where ambushes live, where the silence isn't peaceful, it's loaded. And Cole Brandon knew it the moment the walls started closing in. The pass was narrow, too narrow. Sunlight barely touched the canyon floor, and every echo came back like it was keeping secrets. His hand hovered near his revolver, not from fear, but from knowing how men like the ones he was chasing think. Confident, careless, the kind who believe the desert itself will protect them. Then the first shot rang out. Dust exploded where his head had been just a breath before. Cole hit the ground hard, rolled behind a boulder, drew fast. Two men up high, rifles ready, but they weren't pros. They were loud, sloppy, and high on the idea that no one could touch them. Cole fired once, then twice. One dropped, the other ran, but Cole didn't. Run. He climbed, boots digging into stone, fingers bleeding against the edge. He scaled that cliff like a man with no other direction left. And when he reached the top, he found the second shooter still scrambling, trying to reload with shaking hands. Cole didn't ask his name. He didn't care. A fist, a knee, and cold steel to the throat was all it took. And then came the question, where is she? The man stammered. Old mining camp east of Snake Ridge. Half a day's ride. She's still alive for now, and they're waiting for a buyer. Some rich bastard from Santa Fe with coin and no soul. Cole's jaw clenched. That's the kind of detail that makes a man forget restraint. But he didn't pull the trigger, not yet. He fired once in the dirt beside the man's ear. Just enough to make the message clear. You tell the rest of your crew what you saw, Cole said, voice low and cold. You tell them the next man who lays a hand on her won't get a warning. Because this wasn't justice, this wasn't law. This was something older, something primal. See, when you take a woman like Ka, who once risked everything for someone like Cole, you don't just steal a person, you light a fuse. And now, that fuse was burning fast. By the time Cole mounted up and turned his horse toward that old camp, the sun had begun its slow descent. But he wasn't slowing down. Because sometimes a warning shot isn't meant to save a life. It's meant to signal the storm that's coming next. There's a moment just before twilight hits full dark, when the world holds its breath. The shadows stretch long. The sky turns the color of old bruises, and everything feels like it could go either way. Peace or violence. That's exactly when Cole Brandon reached the mining camp. It sat in a sunken bowl of land ringed by jagged rock and ghost stories. Once this place echoed with the sound of pickaxes and dreams of silver. Now it was a hideout, a pit stop for men with black hearts and dirtier hands. From behind a boulder, Cole watched. 5 horses out front, a few voices inside, and the flicker of lamplight dancing through broken windows. He counted 3, maybe 4. Then he heard something different, sharper, a foreign accent. That would be the buyer. Early time wasn't on his side, but neither was hesitation. He spotted a smaller building off to the side. Low, dark, probably a storage shed. He moved like a whisper, knife drawn, no wasted movement. The lock gave, after a twist of steel and grit. And inside on the floor was Kay. Her wrists were bound, blood dried at the corner of her mouth. She blinked at the sudden light, frozen in that split second between fear and recognition. Then, Cole, she whispered. He dropped to his knees beside her, knife slicing through the ropes like it was mercy itself. I'm here, he said, quiet, certain. They were going to sell me, she murmured. That man, the one from Santa Fe, he's dangerous, rich. She tried to stand, wobbled. You can walk? He asked. She nodded. Barely, but I'll manage. Cole helped her to the door and pointed toward a trail behind the ridge. There's a horse. Ride west. Fast. Don't stop till the creek. She grabbed his arm. Her voice shook, not from fear, but from knowing. Don't die. He looked her in the eyes and smiled. Tight. Honest. Not planning to. And just like that, she slipped into the night, a shadow carried by wind. And Cole? He turned back toward the camp, toward the men inside, toward the fire he could feel building in his chest, because sometimes justice doesn't come with a badge. It comes with blood. And tonight, justice rode in on one man's fury, one man who'd had enough of watching the innocent suffer while monsters played cards by lamplight. They'd taken someone who once saved his life. Now, they were going to learn what it cost to try and sell a storm like Kay. And Cole Brandon? He was done warning. He was ready to burn it all down. There are nights when the world turns quiet but not peaceful, quiet like a beast holding its breath before it bites. That's the kind of night Cole Brandon chose to strike. The men in that camp were laughing, drinking, thinking the danger had passed. They were wrong. Cole didn't walk through the front door. He kicked it in like a promise, his revolver barking before anyone could blink. One man fell with a grunt. The others scrambled, cards flying, chairs crashing, too slow to match the fury of a man who didn't come to negotiate. Gunfire echoed through the camp like thunder over dry stone. Another shot. Another man dropped. The buyer from Santa Fe ducked behind a crate, yelling in Spanish, panic cutting through his accent. Snake Daniels, the man who led the raid, the one with the sneer that slithered like his name, dived for his pistol. But Cole was faster. Always was. A third shot shattered the lantern, plunging the room into shadows and flame. Chaos spread like oil fire. Men shouted. One tried to run. Cole dropped him with a shot to the back. No hesitation. This wasn't a fight. This was a reckoning. In the smoke and screaming, two men were left breathing. Snake, bloodied and gasping on the floor, and the buyer cornered, begging in a language Cole didn't care to understand. Snake looked up, laughed through a cough. She wasn't worth all this, he muttered. And that's when Cole said it. The words weren't loud, but they hit like a bullet. She was everything. Then he pulled the trigger. The buyer sobbed, offered gold, excuses, swore he hadn't, laid a hand on her. Cole stepped closer, eyes like steel forged in hell. You paid for flesh, he said. That's enough. The final shot echoed and the fire caught hold. By the time Cole stepped out, the old mining camp was burning behind him. Timbers crackling, flames climbing into the night like judgment. He didn't look back. Not once. He mounted up, rode hard, toward the creek where Ka waited. And in that fire, something more than wood burned. It was the weight of silence, of rage, of all the years he'd spent swallowing what he should have screamed. Tonight, Cole didn't ask the world to be fair. He simply made sure evil didn't walk away untouched. Because sometimes justice isn't measured in courts or coins. Sometimes it's just one man, with a gun, a name, and nothing left to lose. Some places don't need a sign to feel like safety. You know it the second you see them. For Cole Brandon and Kay, that place came after 3 days riding through dust, shadows, and silence, a ranch tucked between wind-worn hills, with fences that leaned like tired old men and a chimney that still breathed smoke into the sky. It belonged to Jed Alton. Jed wasn't just some rancher off the map. He was the kind of man who remembered every scar but didn't ask about yours. He'd served beside Cole's father during the war. That kind of bond? It sticks. Doesn't matter how many years pass or how many bullets come between. When Cole showed up looking like the end of the world and Kay barely holding herself upright, Jed just opened the door and said, "Come on in. You look like hell. No questions, no judgment. Just bread, coffee, a warm fire, and silence that didn't feel like a threat. And for a brief moment, it felt like maybe the war was behind them. But peace is fragile when the road you took is still warm with boot prints behind you." And Cole, he knew how these men operated. They weren't the kind to forget. Not after losing a buyer, losing coin, losing face, especially not Malister's kind. By the second night, the signs were there. Dust trails on the ridge, too slow to be wind, too careful to be cattle. Cole didn't say it out loud. He didn't have to. Kai saw it in the way his eyes kept drifting to the window. Jed saw it in the way Cole cleaned his rifle, slow and methodical, like a prayer made of oil and metal. Kay said it best. "They're coming, aren't they?" And Cole just nodded. Not afraid, just sure. See, when you run long enough, you learn to read the quiet. You learn that not every silence is peace. Sometimes it's the hush before thunder, and sometimes it's the sound of men circling the last bit of light they're about to try and snuff out. But here's what they didn't know. Cole wasn't running anymore. Not from his past. Not from the blood. Not from the fire. This ranch, this place might have been built for cattle and corn, but tonight it was going to stand for something else. Tonight it was going to stand for them. Some fights you walk away from. Others, you plant your feet and make damn sure they don't. By dawn, Cole Brandon had already made his choice. He wasn't leaving. Not this time. Not when the ghosts behind them were still riding hard and hungry for revenge. Not when Ka was finally free and the only thing standing between her and another cage was him. Outside, the sky was bruised gray, the kind of morning that smelled like something was coming. Inside the ranch house, it was quiet but not calm. It was the silence of preparation, of grit. Cole moved like a man who'd been here before. Saddle cinched, rifle checked, windows barricaded, furniture flipped into cover. Every round counted and laid out like coins on a gambler's table. Jed helped where he could, grunting, favoring his side where the old wound still burned, but never complaining. That's the kind of loyalty you don't earn with words. You earn it in fire. And Ka, she wasn't the same woman who stumbled out of that mine camp. She sat by the hearth, sharpening her father's blade with steady hands. Her voice, when she finally spoke, wasn't loud, but it cut clean. "They think we're property, like we're something to own, but we're not staying quiet anymore." It hit hard. Because that fight, the one between silence and survival, it doesn't just happen out there with bullets and blood. It happens inside you, in how long you let fear make your choices, in how many times you swallow your voice just to stay alive. And Ka, she'd had enough of that. You see, that's what this stand was about, not just survival, not just revenge. It was about reclaiming something, dignity, freedom, worth. For every girl dragged by a rope, for every man who thought his gun made him God. Cole didn't speak much. He never had to. But you could see it in the way he moved. This wasn't about being a hero. This was about drawing a line. And when they came, and they would come, they'd find out real fast. The people they thought were broken, they were just sharpening their blades. Some nights the sky doesn't darken, it bruises. And when the first shot rang out, cracking the stillness like a bone snapping in the dark, Cole Brandon knew the reckoning had come. It started with a window shattering, glass exploding inward, a bullet punching through the frame. Cole dropped low, rifle ready, breath steady. Jed took the side window, firing from the hip. Kay crouched near the hearth, calm as still water, waiting for the right moment. These weren't just scared survivors anymore. This was a trio who had nothing left to run from, and nothing left to lose. The attackers came in waves. First just a few riders circling, then volleys of gunfire from behind the corral and trees. Dust rose like smoke, the air thick with the smell of gunpowder and sweat. It wasn't just a battle, it was personal. Every shot fired had a name behind it. Every scream meant someone wasn't going home. And then came the voice. Mason Trent. Cole muttered. Out in the open under the blood-red moon stood the butcher of Waco. Tall, brutal, teeth filed flat like a dog gone rabid. He'd once ridden with Mallister, but even monsters had nightmares, and Trent was one of them. He wasn't there for the bounty. He was there to finish what had started years ago. You hold up with your little toy, huh? He sneered. Thought, you could steal from us and ride off like a hero? Cole didn't blink. He stepped out onto the porch, rifle raised, not to kill, not yet. The warning shot tore Trent's hat clean off. "You take one more step," Cole growled. "I won't miss." That was all it took. The final assault began. Boots slammed onto the porch, bullets ripping through timber. Cole fired point blank, shotgun booming like thunder. Kay dropped a second man near the barn. Inside, fire took hold. A lantern kicked over, flames licking the walls. But they didn't retreat. They didn't flinch. And then Trent came through the door. Blade in hand. Eyes wild, he charged. Cole met him head on, no more guns, just fists, blood, grit. They crashed into walls, furniture splintering, rage boiling over. Trent was faster than he looked, stronger than he should have been. But Cole had something he didn't. Kay. Jed. A reason. Trent raised his blade high, ready to gut him. But Cole grabbed his wrist, twisted, and drove cold steel into his side. Trent's eyes went wide. "You first," Cole whispered. The fight ended in silence. Outside, the fire was dying. But inside, a different flame burned, one forged from loss, loyalty, and one final truth. The past may come knocking, but it doesn't get to decide how your story ends. Morning came slow, like the land itself was trying to forget what happened the night before. Smoke still hung low in the air, clinging to the broken edges of the house. Blood had dried into the floorboards. The fire was out, but its memory lingered, in every scorched beam. Cole and Ka didn't speak much that morning. Some grief is too heavy for words. Instead, they picked up shovels and started digging. 5 graves. 5 men who thought power came from fear. Now they were buried behind the oyo barn under the same dirt they once used to hide their sins. Cole shoveled with a rhythm that looked like punishment. Ka helped too, hands blistered, face grim. The wind was soft over the mounds, like even the earth understood that justice had been served. Later, sitting on the porch, Ka looked out across the blackened fields and said what was already in the air. "They'll come back." Cole nodded, calm. "Good. Let them. They need to know this place doesn't belong to people like them anymore." And right then, you knew. They weren't running. They weren't hiding. They were building something. Not just a home, but a line in the sand. The rest of that day they worked in silence, repaired what they could, reinforced the windows, rebuilt the broken door. And when the light began to fade, Ka stepped into the backyard with a small satchel of seeds. She knelt near the fence and began to plant. It might not seem like much, dropping seeds into dirt still stained by fire. But that's the kind of act that says more than revenge ever could. It says, we're still here. We're not done. Because sometimes the strongest thing a person can do isn't fight. It's rebuild. Not just walls, but purpose, dignity, hope. Kay didn't say why she planted those seeds. She didn't need to. Maybe it was for the women who taught her to grow life in the middle of death. Maybe it was a promise to herself. Or maybe, just maybe, it was to prove that even from ashes, something new can rise. And Cole? He stood nearby, rifle slung low, watching the horizon, still ready, always listening. But now, for the first time, in a long time, he wasn't just guarding what had been lost, he was protecting what might finally grow. Out in the wide open, some stories don't end. They just shift into something quieter, something steadier. And for Cole and Kai, that's exactly what came next. There was no grand confession, no sweeping kiss at sunset. What grew between them didn't need fireworks. It lived in the silence, in the way Ka leaned into Cole's back as they rode, in how she handed him a cup of coffee before he asked, in how he always checked the horizon twice, just to make sure it stayed clear, for her love sometimes doesn't shout, it just stays. Then one day a rider came down the trail, dust in his beard and urgency in his eyes. Word from the east. Mallister's gang, the one that started all this, had shattered after Snake Daniels and Trent were cut down. Some had fled. Others were regrouping under new names, hungrier than before. But this time Ka didn't flinch and, Cole didn't reach for the saddle. They stood side by side as the rider asked, "So, are you running?" Kay looked him dead in the eye. "This land is ours now, every stone, every root. We bled for it, and we're not just waiting. We're watching." Let that sink in for a second. Most people think survival means hiding, but real survival, real ownership, means standing your ground, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. They weren't naive. They knew this wasn't the end, that trouble would come again, that blood might spill again. But something had changed. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were defenders, guardians of something bigger than themselves. That night they walked the perimeter together. The land was quiet, moonlight stretching over fields where fire once burned. Ka's hand brushed against Cole's, and in the hush between stars, she asked, "Do you think the war will ever end?" He looked out into the dark and said, "I don't know. But maybe one day it won't feel like war anymore." That was enough, because sometimes peace doesn't come like a storm passing. It comes like planting a seed and choosing to stay long enough to see what grows, and whatever came next, they weren't afraid anymore.